We're going to be in Acts chapter 8. So if you have a Bible, you want to open there. Acts chapter 8 is where our primary text is going to be for today. We're not going to start there, but you can go ahead and have a Bible ready for that, okay? Acts chapter 8. Do I have anyone who loves to read? Okay. Are you the only person that loves to read? Okay, I got another one over here. Okay, good. Now the readers' hands are starting to go up. Okay, so I've got a couple that love to read. Great. Let me ask a question. For those of you who love to read, feel free to shout out the answer. For those of you who don't love to read, do you like to watch TV? Okay, great. Perfect. I've now hit everyone in the group. Awesome, Braden. I'll get you too. Don't worry. You know, I'm the guy that says save the book, watch the movie. So I understand more about you TV people than I do about you reading people. But I want to ask a question, first to the reading people, but then secondly, this also applies to you people who are TV people, okay? What is it about a book that makes it stick to you? That makes it come alive, that makes you just want to keep reading it? And, ooh, the imagination. Ooh, is that a knock against the TV people? I'm going to pretend like it's not. The same's true with the TV show, though. What is it about a TV show that just draws you in, that keeps you connected to it? The action. We want to see action. Going back to the imagination of a book, when you're reading a book and you're able to create the imagery in your head, what is it then that just makes all of that seem to stick? Ooh, maybe it's that we're learning something. Maybe in this time of either, I'm going to stick with probably more books right now, but there's not educational TV. I mean, there's the History Channel, okay? There's this time where we feel a connection, where we're learning something, and primarily we're learning something about people in the past. Things that have gone on, or even in the sci-fi ideas, we're seeing things that possibly can be in the future. And so part of this fills within us a connection to things beyond just ourselves. The truly greats, let's think about the 100 great pieces of literature of all time. The Great Gatsby, Crime and Punishment, the Brothers Karamazov. You know, those classic pieces of literature. What makes them truly great? Why would they be considered the greatest pieces of literature? Linda. Okay. Hey, that's a great. There's some human character aspect that shows the goodness of humanity. Even, I'm going to take that one step further, Linda, because you started the phrase. Trenton, did you have a comment? No. Oh, just a good stretch. That's okay. You know, I'm going to take that one step further and say that truly great literature is truly great, or truly great TV shows or movies or whatever. They're truly great because there's a component to them that you can be a part of, that you can step into, that speaks to the greater depth of humanity. Fyodor Dostoevsky, who wrote The Brothers Karamazov, he is an incredible writer because he writes from a psychological standpoint where you can see both the good and the bad of people. And the goal in each of those images, in each of those books that he's written, is for you to see yourself hopefully not as the villain, but hopefully as the one who's good. So when we read, whatever we read, unless if it's a boring textbook, you like doctors and nurses and lawyer people, the people who read the boring stuff. When you're reading that stuff, I'm sorry, that doesn't apply right now. But when you read truly great literature, you feel a connection to it. I want to throw up a verse real quick. This is Isaiah chapter 53. I believe it's verse 7. And what I want us to do is I want us to read 7 and 8. We're going to stop. And then I want to ask you the question, what in this text strikes you? This text may not strike you, and that's okay, because this text may not It may not speak to who you are. And if it doesn't speak to you, then I want you to ask the question, what type of person would this text speak to? And if it does speak to you, feel free to say, this speaks to me, and this is the word, this is the thought, this is what comes to my mind. This is Isaiah 53, verse 7. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and like a sheep before its shears were silent, so he did not open his mouth. Verse 8. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. Yet who of his generation protested? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgressions of my people he was punished. Now, the question, does this speak to you? Is there something in those two verses that you said, wait a second, that hit me somewhere? And it doesn't have to. If it doesn't, what type of person do you see it hitting?
I mean, it definitely does me, as I obviously want to be more like Christ. The part where it says that he didn't even speak.
Yeah.
He doesn't even try to defend himself.
Doesn't even defend himself.
Yeah.
And as we try to be like Christ, how often am I quick?
I spent my entire life fighting others and all that kind of stuff. And it's nice to just be able to sit there and know that I am, I guess, in harmony or sync with God, and I don't have to defend myself all the time.
I don't have to defend myself. Now that we've heard Matt's comment, I don't know, is it Matthew or Matt? Okay, good. I'll call you Matt. I like Matt better. Does anyone else have a thought? Maybe something he said that spurred you on to think, but is there something in this text? And if it doesn't hit you, then what type of person do you see it hitting? No one of the generation protested. What does that tell you, Lynn? In a time, a person who's oppressed, who's beaten down, and if you took out, if I didn't put Isaiah 53 up there, and if I just told you this is a great piece of literature, you would say someone who's been oppressed, who's been beaten down. As I come across this text, this is Isaiah 53. I see that the context hits to the idea of someone who is oppressed, who is hurt, who is beat down, and who has by no choice, no circumstance of themselves, this is the situation that they're in. Life dealt them a bum hand, and they're stuck playing with it. And they don't really know what else to do. And matter of fact, even in their I don't know what else to do idea, there is nothing else they can do because they have nothing to play. And life just is in the pits. The blues, as a good friend of mine used to say, it's just the blues. Now, I do have a question. Have you ever felt like your life was just in the blues? That it was in the pits? That there was something about life that it just wasn't working. The cards that you were dealt, the situation that you're dealing with, all of these things, they're just not, it's not going to work out for you. You see, as I go across this text and I see what the power is of this text to connect to somebody, I see that it's a powerful text. Now jump over to Acts chapter 8 for a moment with me. The reason I started in Isaiah 53 is because in Acts chapter 8, The Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch is the account that we're looking at today. And so as Philip is traveling along, the Holy Spirit tells him, hey, you need to go to this area because I've got a guy for you to talk to. And so as Philip goes to this region, he sees or he hears, I don't know how that really works, but he sees the chariot of the Ethiopian eunuch traveling along. He goes, kind of hitches his travel up with the Ethiopian eunuch. And as he's traveling along, the eunuch is reading Isaiah 53, verse 7 and 8. And Philip, being full of the Spirit, which, by the way, in Acts chapter 6, we're told that Philip is one of the 7 men who was anointed to be one of the first deacons. So he's a good man. He's a godly man. He is full of the Spirit. And as he has hitched his horse up, if you will, to this chariot, and as he's riding along, he experiences the eunuch. For those of you who do not know what a eunuch is a man who has been castrated. This in the ancient world would have been very common for a person who dealt either in a king's harem, because you don't want to pollute the royal bloodline, or it would have been done for treasury. Because the idea was that if you remove a man's masculinity, his manhood, that he would all of a sudden not crave the desires of this world, that in some way he would be higher than them. And so that was a very common thing for people in this time of particularly people in charge of treasuries, which we find out this guy, if you're in Acts chapter 8, who did he work for? Candace, queen of Ethiopia. So we already know his situation. He is riding along in a chariot. By the way, the chariot is some form of a chariot because it's at least got a seat for 2 people in it. So, I mean, let me just go and put it this way. Do y'all know a Rolls Royce? Y'all got the Rolls Royce in your head? You know that big, I mean, they're like a tank. I've actually only seen one in my entire life. It was over at, where was it at? Oh, it was the Toyota dealership. They had one out front, and I'm like, why would a Toyota dealership have a Rolls Royce? Beside the point. Imagine a Rolls Royce being pulled by a team of chariots, and the Ethiopian eunuch is the guy riding in the Rolls Royce. That's the method of travel he is. And when this man travels, he's not traveling just by himself. He has an entourage of people going with him because he's got money, he's got wealth, he's got prestige. There's got to be food that's traveling with him. And the trip that he makes from Ethiopia to Jerusalem, give or take, a short time, 3 months, long time, 6 months. So his travels to Jerusalem are an extensive trip. He's gone to Jerusalem. And guess what? As a eunuch, when he got to Jerusalem and he wanted to worship, whether he's a Jew or not, we really don't know. We know that he's a God-fearing man. And so let's say he gets to the temple. And as he arrives at the temple, how far in would he be allowed as a eunuch? Not far. What I want you to see is that this is a man who his entire life has really lived in the posh of luxury. Well, for at least the most of it, at least the life that we know. The life we know, we see that he's extremely wealthy, he's extremely influential. Everything that we could say he would ever want in life is his. He snaps his finger and people jump. He has the world. But there's something he doesn't have. And that's the thing that he probably most wants. That's the thing that when we read Isaiah 53 from a eunuch's perspective might change our idea. Now, I want you to put yourself in the idea of a eunuch. Remind yourself you are a castrated male. Now, I have every guy now probably thinking, ouch. I have every girl, every lady thinking, what's that like? The best I can give it to you. Have you ever known someone who, let's say for cancer's sake, had to have their breasts removed? The emotional piece to that. You know, it's skin, it's tissue. We can remove that, but there's an emotional quality that misses. And so that's why we have reconstructive surgery. That's why women will do things like that to help themselves feel better. So put yourselves on the man's side of things. You've lost your testicles, and there's nothing you can do about it. Is that a funny word? Elliot says it now, and it's kind of funny when it comes from a little kid. It's a slow laugh. It'll get you in a minute. I want you to think, though, for a eunuch, though. Read Isaiah 53 from a eunuch's perspective and see how the text fits. He was oppressed. He was afflicted. In some way, he was cut. He was marred. He was beaten. Yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter. Something was cut. Like a shear, he did not open his mouth. Verse 8. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. Yet who of his generation being this idea of who your children are going to be, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, who of his generation protested, for he was cut off from the land of the living? I see in Acts chapter 8 the eunuch reading the Bible, and when he's reading this story, he is reading it from the perspective that he is. He is a person who has everything that this world could ever offer, except the one thing that he most wants is he wants people to look at him like he is truly a man. He goes to the temple in Jerusalem, he's not welcome. And by the way, if he's a eunuch from a childhood or from a young age, he probably didn't form properly. So he's probably a little shorter, he's probably a little smaller in stature. He probably doesn't look right. So his entire life, he has been looked on and judged and frowned upon because he was not like everybody else. He's lived a life in bondage, but he was one of the most free people ever. He was in bondage to what other people thought, said, and did to him. And in this moment, when Philip joins the chariot, and it says that Philip taught to him the message of Jesus starting in Isaiah 53, I can't help but think maybe he took him to Isaiah 56, which is just a page or two over from the text. It's in the same monologue with the Isaiah 53, but in Isaiah 56, he says, "For the foreigner will bind themselves to the Lord, to minister to him, to love the name of the Lord, and to be his servants." Where was I at? Was it 6? Verse 4, thank you. Sorry I'm off. "To the eunuch who keeps my Sabbath, who chooses to please me and hold fast to my covenant, to them I will give within my temple and its walls a memorial and a name better than the sons and daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that will endure forever." So Isaiah tells that even to the eunuch, which by the way, we're 3 chapters removed from where the eunuch's reading. It says, if you will be faithful to God, if you will love God, if you will commit yourself to God, I will give you something better than children. I'll give you something better than life. I will give you something that's so great you cannot understand it. Your name will